And you know what? Kicking off the show, can't get any better than this. Actor Joe Mantegna, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Cam. How you doing?
I'm good. I think the first time I met you was at the Oak Tree Rod and Gun Club in California for a celebrity sporting clays tournament, and you were out there. We got a chance to speak, and I think hopefully everybody knows by now what a sportsman you are, and you know your love of and appreciation for our firearms heritage. But I want to talk to you, and I want to get to that. But before we do, I want to talk about what you're doing with the National Museum of the United States Army, because this is planned for Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is actually just right across the river from where we're located.
Right.
And I know that this is a project that is very near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, in fact, I just came from lunch with more generals than you could shake a stick at, where we talked about the planning of this. Yeah, it's going to be the National Museum for the United States Army. I mean, oddly enough, the Army is the one branch of the service that really does not have a national museum, as all the other branches do. But here, you know, more individuals have served in the United States Army of any branch of our services here in the United States. And so this will be a long overdue museum for them, and it's going to be, as you can imagine, it's going to be cutting edge. It's going to have everything from, they're doing a lot of recordings of different members of throughout the history of the Army that can go in, do live kind of recordings, things, so people will be able to go in. It's going to be as much educational, let's put it that way,
right,
as it is for entertainment or research or anything else. So it's going to be quite a project, and I'm from a fairly extensive military family, and most of them were Army. So for me, it's a privilege to represent them and to act as basically their celebrity spokesman, and we're, you know, the plans are done, the grounds will be broken soon. It's just a matter of finishing up the funding, and it's just an exciting project, and the men in charge. I mean, I was with General Sullivan today, who's one of the people involved, and General Creighton Abrams, who got me into it initially, and it's going to be really something for our whole nation to be very proud of and appreciative of.
Absolutely. Well, that's got to be a real honor and a privilege to be a part of something like that, and knowing that you're helping to tell these stories of so many men and women too, who have helped keep this country free.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, especially in terms of the United States Army, we go back to those first guys, the farmers. We go back to Revolutionary War. We're talking about guys that just George Washington. We're talking about right from the beginning. And so without the Army, and I mean, of course, with all our armed services, but I'm representing the Army, so let's deal with that. But without the Army, we have no United States of America. We have, a Constitution our Constitution is something. I mean, it's really something in terms of just in terms of documents that exist on this planet. But it's just a piece of paper, unless you got something to back it up.
Yep.
And so let's just face it, our military, the military is having to cash our checks for a long, long time. And so without their efforts and without a strong defense and without having our military, we would not be the nation that we are.
I agree completely, and I'll say this as well. We have a volunteer military, and those men and women who choose to serve, and I never wore the uniform, those men and women who choose to serve, I think, deserve the support. They have earned the support, and we have an obligation, those of us who have never served, to support those men and women. And I see around the country, I see those heartfelt chances and those opportunities to do that, but I do see people I see some others just dismiss the idea that they owe these men and women anything.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, I think the one thing I try to stress is, first of all, let's not make it political. I mean, in other words, I think some people come in with the idea of that politics get involved with our support of our military. That can't be the case. I mean, first of all, our military has to, they follow our commander-in-chief, whoever it may be, and have from the beginning. I mean, that's the basis of our democracy, of our country, is that we do have that separation of, the civil and military and all that. And so right there, that's a factor. And so supporting our military. I mean, thank God. I mean, I'm old enough to have grown up through the Vietnam era and saw that there was a whole kind of where it got very political then, and because of it, in a way, our military took the brunt of all the. It was almost like it was their fault, and they were taking the blame for an unpopular war. And it was like, well, wait a minute, these are our sons and daughters and brothers and sisters and that, and we were doing, in essence. All we can hope is that our legislature, our people in the executive branch, in the legislative branch, in the judicial branch, that they're doing their job, and if nothing else, are only putting these men and women in harm's way when they feel that it needs to be done and has to be done, and for whatever and we just hope and pray that those are ultimately turn out to be historically legitimate reasons and reasons that we can be proud of, but so be it. At the end of the day, the guy that's lost an arm or a leg or an eye or amputee or someone who's killed, it's a little late for them to start discussing the political ramifications of what they've done and that stuff.
Right.
So that's what I think that the public has to understand, is that support from our military is, if you're an American, then there should be just no question about it that we support our military. And I personally, I've been an independent my whole life, because partly for that reason, I don't like to follow groups. Period. I figure a group of more than 2 or 3 people can make me nervous. So my feeling is follow the beliefs that you have and be grateful that you live in a country where you have the ability to do that.
Well, exactly. We are individuals. One of the things that makes this country great is our individual freedom, our individual liberty, our ability to think for ourselves, to make decisions for ourselves, and. It's interesting because Hollywood in Los Angeles, and I'll admit I'm not an expert. Mm-hmm. I've been there once. The time I met you, as a matter of fact.
Right.
But it strikes me that here is a city that is a very creative city. It is creatively powered. It's run by individuals, and it is the big city that it is because of creativity and the artists who again have individual visions. But is there a mentality that you've got to go along to get along in LA, or is LA now a big enough place that you can find your 2 or 3 people to get along?
I mean, all I can say is I hope so, because I certainly don't, necessarily go along with anyone. In other words, I've certainly gone my own way my entire career, and I can't say that it's helped me or hurt me or anything in between.
Right.
At the end of the day, I have no problem separating what I do for a living with what my personal, beliefs are and the things that I want to champion or campaign for or whatever. And sure. On the other hand, I also don't believe, I'm not one of those that gets out there and says, hey, this is what I think, and therefore I think you should do it. You know what I mean?
And I honestly appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a supporter. First, that's what I meant about politically. I've never gone out and supported any presidential elections. I've never supported anyone specifically, because I always felt I'm in a public profession as it is. So a lot of people. I mean, I walked into this building today, and I mean, as you can imagine, I'm being inundated by, take a picture, please, and it's wonderful. I understand it. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Many people know who I am, and they usually have a smile on their face and want to take a photo, and I get it. But I have to be careful about the power in a way that comes with that. And so if I use that position to be able to say, okay, well, here, since you all seem to like me so much, let me tell you how I feel about this, and that.
Right.
And it's not my job to all of a sudden make somebody say, well, gee, just because Joe Mantegna, I liked what he does on Criminal Minds, therefore, since he believes this, I'm going to believe that too. No, that's not what it's about. What it should be about is that, hey, educate yourself. I'll let you know how I feel about something and why I feel this way. But I'm not going to tell you what to do about it. You do something about it. That's not just your privilege as an American. That's your duty as an American. I mean, you have to be invested in this country. I mean, I was in this discussion today with all these different generals, and I got into the discussion of mandatory service. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting, because not that I'm saying I think there should be mandatory service in the military per se. Everybody has to take a gun and get out there and fight.
Right.
But everybody should have an investment in this country, I think, for at least a couple of years, let's say from 18 to 20. And if you do that on a national basis, I think then you're creating a country where you got
some skin in the game.
You got some skin in the game, and in a short period of time, think about it. Let's say you started on 2000. Let's say hypothetically we started that at 2015. In 2025, only 10 years later, you've created all these generations of people that started at 18 years old. Now they're all in their late 20s, 30s, who have all now have spent those 2 years being invested in something that they can say, hey, I did it, that poor kid down the block did it, that rich kid further down the block did it, the black kid did it, the white kid did it, the Jewish kid did it, the Catholic kid did it. We all shared that thing, regardless of where we go in life. As Americans, we did this thing for our country, whether it was fixing potholes in the street, whether it was fighting overseas, whether it was working in a hospital, whether it was helping to build a bridge, whatever it may be. And I'd have to say most of the generals, I think, not all of them in one way or another, agreed with that concept.
Right.
And I think that, then things like the Constitution, things like the Second Amendment, all that stuff starts to make a little bit more sense.
It's fascinating and a very thoughtful idea, Joe. I got to say, will you come back? Can I ponder this for a little bit?
Sure.
Will you come back on the program and talk about this more?
Ponder all you want.
Because I'm fascinated about this. I've thought about this myself. I'm one of those people who I don't like being told what to do. So the idea of mandatory stuff does rankle me. But having said that, I also love and we need.
Right.
We need Americans who have that skin in the game, who have that investment, who are involved in a way, and they feel connected in a different way than they may.
Yeah. And look, we already do a lot of mandatory things, whether we like it or not.
I know.
mean, you pay taxes, I pay taxes, we all pay taxes. We may disagree as how it's being used, but at the end of the day, we're all doing lots of things mandatorily. I think this is one that, it's that whole thing of freedom ain't free. And I think that's part of it. Yep. You know what I mean? It's one thing to being said, I don't like to be told to do something. But this is, then my feeling is then find a place then where you don't really have to do anything. There might be a spot on an island somewhere where you can kind of, rule your own little domain. But at the end of the day, we've got 300 million people here that all have to work together, live together, and also live by, our founding fathers left behind a pretty terrific sets of documents to go by, and they really kind of hold up. They still kind of hold. Smart guys.
They were.
Jefferson was a pretty smart guy, and all those other guys. And,
absolutely.
And it seems to still work.
Actor, sportsman Joe Mantegna, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. And again, the national spokesman for the National Museum of the United States Army, which is being built at Fort Belvoir. Joe, again, thank you so much. Hope we can do it again very soon.
My pleasure. My pleasure indeed.
We were just talking over the break, and I thought it was fascinating, Joe. You said that one of the most educational things that you'd ever done was to get your hunting license decades ago.
Without question. Part of it was because, first of all, I grew up in a very urban environment. I grew up in the city of Chicago, in the streets of Chicago. My father was a farm boy, though. He'd grown up in Oklahoma.
Really? Do you mind me asking what part?
No, I grew up in Krebs, Oklahoma, outside Henrietta.
Okay.
In fact, we still own 50 acres there.
Really?
Yeah, and my dad was really he was an Okie. He really was, and in his heart, he always was a farm boy, and so hunting and fishing and all of that was a big part of his life. But yet, at a young age, his father passed away, and due to those circumstances, the whole family had to move to Chicago because that was the only place a relative lived that my grandmother knew. And so it turned into a whole urban existence. And so then I was born, my brother was born, and so we grew up in a totally opposite kind of environment than my father did. Mm-hmm. But yet he always used to talk to me about it and the stories and having the dogs and the hunting and the fishing and all that. But stuff that I couldn't really relate to and never really got into because of just the way I was, the environment I was living in.
Right.
But then later in life when I got interested, in, especially in the shooting sports, and I was asked to do what I think was American Sportsman, one of those TV shows back then. So I had to get a hunting license. So I figured, okay, I'm going to get a hunting license, see what this is all about. The education of getting in the process of getting a hunting license opened up my eyes to so many things, and it just, and I think I would encourage people to get a hunting, especially people I think who go in with the kind of the prejudice of like, oh, hunters, those are people who go out and kill the animals that we all love. They hate animals, they're hunters. Go take a course in order and go and get your hunting license and find out how much of that involved is taking care of the land, taking care of the animals, understanding that we want to propagate these species. We don't want to destroy these species. We want to propagate the environment. We want the wetlands to be there so that the ducks and geese have a place to go and live and thrive, as opposed to building condos on the land.
Absolutely.
So in other words, the hunters, when done at the proper level, a level that you, of course, would acknowledge and would want to propagate, is hunting as it should be, meaning that it's that balance of man and nature and making sure that we have, these species survive, that we have organizations like Ducks Unlimited, Quail Unlimited, Deer Unlimited, whatever, so that we're always sure that these animals will continue to survive, have places to live, mm-hmm. and that the generations of people, with little boys and girls growing up, that they grow up with that tradition that's been around for, God, since the beginning of man. I mean, we go back to the, the history of man. It's not an anti-animal kind of thing to be a hunter or sportsman.
Not at all.
The contrary is true. And so when it's, like I said, done correctly, we're only helping in terms of all terms of conservation, whether it's for the animals or whether for it's the land itself.
Absolutely. I remember seeing I think it was 60 Minutes actually did a segment, last year it was, and they were talking about ranches in Texas that had exotic animals from Africa. These were endangered in the wild.
Right.
Because there is no wildlife management plan. You've got poaching in Africa. You've got people who don't care about the population. In Texas, these animals are thriving.
Right.
There are thousands of them, but the reason why they're there is because hunters will go and pay money on these ranches to hunt them.
Exactly. I remember an instance, one of the things, again, that helped really turn my head around was many years ago. It must have been probably 25 years ago. There was a flood in the Everglades section of Florida. And there's a specific kind of deer there, a small kind of Everglades kind of deer. And they had estimated that due to this flooding, something like 1,000 of these deer were going to die. They were just going to die from lack of food. There was just their food source was totally devastated by the flood.
Right.
They were going to die. The governor, I believe, at that time came up with this plan, and along with, all the people involved with wildlife and all that within that state said, "Here's a great plan. We'll issue 1,000 hunting licenses just on this one-time basis, $1,000 a piece for these 1,000 hunting licenses. We'll allow these 1,000 hunters to go out there and cull these 1,000 deer. They're going to die anyway. Nowhere near going to touch the whole population. There's still going to be plenty of deer left. With that money, we'll use that money to help in the conservation of the land, the animals, this, that, and the other. We're going to be able to get whatever that amount is, millions of dollars.
Right.
Instead, there was an organization, I think it was Cleveland Amory's our organization at the time, Fund for Animals or whatever. They got a court injunction saying, no, can't kill the deer. We're going to fly them out with helicopters. It's all going to be fine. To cut to the chase, they got the injunction. They helicoptered out, I think, 3 deer. 997 deer died horrible deaths. They made no money. Nothing was saved, nothing was propagated, nothing was helped by this.
Right.
And so, but yet, it's that whole thing on paper. It's like, oh, we're not. Don't worry, kids. We're not going to shoot Bambi. We're going to helicopter them all out. No, they didn't. They died horrible deaths, and nobody benefited from it. So that's stuff like that. When you're educated and look at both sides of an issue, then make your determination. I'm not, I'm saying, look, if you want to be the kind of person that says, no, under no circumstances do I want to shoot an animal or be involved with hunting, that's your choice. You live in a country where you can do that. But at least get both sides of the story.
Make an educated decision.
Make an educated decision. Because I know it helped, certainly in terms of cementing my beliefs and the way I look at things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the more people learn about this, again, not everybody's mind will be changed, but the more people learn, I think, again, the greater appreciation certainly they have for hunting. And when you talk about this as wildlife management, as opposed to the idea that, again, a lot of perhaps some non-hunters have of, well, they just go out and they just blast away in the woods. They don't care what they're doing. It's absurd. We have recovered whitetail populations. You pointed out quail populations. You've got the elk reintroduced into Kentucky, and they're thriving now because you can hunt them. Again, there's just story after story that points to the success of exactly what it is you're talking about. Joe, unfortunately, they're telling me I need to take a break. But thank you again for coming on the program. I hope this will not be the last time we can talk to you.
My pleasure.